I would tell you that I am so excited for us to going back to playing college baseball in postseason and having the tournament this year. This Friday will mark more than a year since we've had college baseball on a championship level, and it is just one of the most exciting times of the year for me as a baseball enthusiast. The tournament revealed today it was a lot of hard work, a lot of challenge for us to get to the field, to make sure that our number one priority was adhered to, which was to get the best teams into the field so that we can have the best tournament possible. So I look forward to the questions that we have today and happy to answer anything that I can.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff. We will go ahead and move to questions. If you would like to ask a question, please go ahead and use the raise hand function. We will get to as many questions as possible. We would ask that you would please limit your request to just one question at a time. We will get to follow-ups as time allows, but we want to get to as many as possible today. So let's go ahead and get started. Our first question today is from Evan Bland. Evan, if you can give us your affiliation once you're unmuted, go ahead with your question.
Hi, Jeff. Yeah, Evan Bland here from the Omaha World-Herald, Omaha, Nebraska. Just wanted to, I guess, ask about both Nebraska and kind of the philosophy with the Big Ten overall, with them just playing a league-only schedule. How much emphasis was put on proximity, RPI? How did you kind of evaluate those teams and where you place them?
Evan, that's a great question. That was the big challenge of this year in hosting or trying to select the teams that deserve to be in. With the Big Ten not playing anybody outside of a conference, we had a certain challenge that the way in which we addressed was relied heavily upon our regional advisory committees to give us eyes on those teams, to see them play and to give us an assessment about how they compared against other teams across the country. It was challenging. I mean, when you look at their RPI, I believe, was it Michigan's RPI was a 90, which may be the highest RPI ever for a large team into the field. But we did that based upon the watching of the team play and understanding the strength of that league and our regional advisory committee's recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. All right, we'll go to the next question. Let's go ahead to Teddy Cahill. Teddy, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Jeff. Teddy Cahill, Baseball America. Just overarching with that RPI, I mean, was there a time when you guys considered, reevaluating RPI or its emphasis on the field, given the unique nature of this year's schedule and, just the fact that this was a year where there were more disparate scheduling philosophies around the country?
Yeah, Teddy, I will tell you, throughout the conversation, we evaluated the use of the RPI, the entire selection process. It was a tool for us. It was a tool that can provide some data. We know it's not 100% accurate. It never is 100% accurate, and it is especially not accurate in a COVID time. So the selection became a little bit more subjective. We had to rely more heavily upon our RAC committees to make sure that we are getting the best teams in the field and seeding them properly. I mean, if you look at Wright State seat, that's one that you could look at and see where they fit. We don't have them as the 24th best team in the country, where I believe the RPI has them listed as the 24th best team. And our evaluation said that they were a good team, but they did not merit that, and they end up being a 4 seed for us in the event. So the RPI was there, but it was not a deciding factor for us in just about anything as we move forward.
Thank you. All right, let's go to Anthony Dasher with UGAsports.com. Anthony, please go ahead with your question.
Hey, Jeff, you just kind of spoke about the RPI not really having everything to do, but as it pertains to Georgia, very close. I know, you mentioned Michigan having a higher RPI, I believe, North Carolina and UC Santa Barbara did as well. Just kind of speak to the Bulldogs and why they did not make the field this year.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's a tough question for us, and I know that the SEC is just a tremendous baseball league. And the fact that the SEC played outside competitions, they played probably more non-conference games than just about anybody in the country. So at least we were able to get an assessment of them relative to the people they played. So it allowed us to look at the league from top to bottom. And, you know, when I look at the strength of schedule, that helps us understand that with Georgia specifically. And if you give me just a second, they're an excellent team. I mean, at the end of the year, they struggled a little bit, as you know. They were 8-15 against tournament field teams. They had an overall RPI win of the games that they won. Their overall RPI rating was a 104. And, you know, they're just the other teams that we seem to get into the field had more wins against teams that'll be in the tournament.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, we'll go next to Mark Etheridge. Mark, please go ahead with your question.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, man, I got a question for you about RPI. Put your math hat on for a minute. And so I understand that, you know, Big Ten, MAC schools, no non-conference play. So you have to treat them a little differently, right? But how did you guys look at conferences like the ACC, for example, that played some non-conference games, but played an expanded conference schedule, which causes their RPI to maybe not be the same as you could view it in other years because you have less interconnectivity. How did you guys go about that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that was one of the challenges. We had, obviously, as I said before, we had conferences that played a regular schedule or normal schedule, attempted to play a normal schedule. Then we had some that played no non-conference games, and then we had several. Most of them were a mixture somewhere in the ACC, as you know, played a limited number of non-conference games, which gave us some data points that we could look at. And it helped inform their RPI rankings. But you're correct. When you look at the highest RPI ranking, I believe was Notre Dame in the field. Was that correct? Yeah, Notre Dame was the highest RPI ranking in the, and they were tough to evaluate. I mean, they had, I want to say 5 non-conference games. So it was a challenge for us, but, you know, we looked as a committee, again, did the eye test on them with our regional advisory groups. We also, history is not a measurement of what we look at, but we're familiar with that. We know the strength that's out there. And so it was a challenge to get the RPI as a useful tool when looking at the ACC. So we really did depend heavily on the racks. We really did depend heavily on the coaches that were there to give us information that allowed us to pass that assessment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go next to Shotgun Spratling. Shotgun, please go ahead with your question.
Hey, Jeff, Shotgun Spratling, D1 Baseball. How did you factor in the various challenges that COVID created for teams, from, say, Pitt's COVID pause to some teams not being able to practice in the fall, or a team like Long Beach who didn't be able to have their first practice until the same week that other teams were playing?
Yeah, we looked at injuries, and that's part of the criteria that we always look at as we try to evaluate teams. And we looked at COVID as being part of games played or games not played. And it really came down to, it affected the teams by losing competitions either way. And what ultimately was left is we just simply had to evaluate what they did do, not what they didn't do. So, many teams had COVID pauses. I know several of the teams, just because I'm most familiar with them in my league, in the A-Sun, in Liberty, had a COVID incident where they were supposed to play us. And when they were not able to play us, they went ahead and rescheduled another top opponent in order to replace us in that time frame. So the pause itself was not the issue. It was whether they were able to play games in that pause or not. And then we could evaluate what they did do.
Thank you. All right, let's go now to Eric Sorensen. Eric, please go ahead with your question. Thank you.
Yeah, hey Jeff, tried X surprise. I got a question about the RPI. No, not too specifically, but I did kind of want to just what was the committee's, I know this was kind of a weird one. What was the committee's discussions and thoughts about Fairfield, the Great Stags from up there in Connecticut? And did they come close to maybe not getting in? What was the discussion with Fairfield this year? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I'll be candid with you. They did come close. It was a very difficult question. You know, you look at their strength of schedule, their record is phenomenal. It's, you know, the highest winning percentage ever in Division I baseball. And so you factor that and you say that should guarantee you a spot in the field. But when you look at their strength of schedule at 164, you know, it's all conference games. You know, how do you measure that anybody outside, everybody in their league played only conference games? So how do we measure if they're going to walk out of it and play anybody and beat anybody else? We don't know that. But what we do know is, you know, in their league, they were phenomenal. They performed, they did everything that they could have done with the body of work that they were able to work on. And we felt that even though it was a very, I won't say contentious is the right word, but it was a lot of conversation took place in regards to, do they merit getting into the field? And ultimately, as you see, the committee believed that they merited it based upon their accomplishments. They merited being in the field.
Beauty. Thanks, Jeff.
You're welcome.
All right, let's go back to Teddy Cahill with another follow-up. Teddy, go ahead.
So sticking with that Fairfield theme, Jeff, Jackson State did play non-conference games, has a pretty similar body of work in terms of conference games. So how do you square those two teams? And, you know, do you worry at all that maybe you're by putting Fairfield in and Jackson State out, you're saying that the SWAC should not have played non-conference games?
You know, and this came up in the meetings, and it was discussed at length. I think one of the things that, you know, again, being completely candid with you guys, is Jackson State did play some non-conference games. They were 1-7 in those non-conference games. So what it gave the indication to us, it gave us some, you know, relativity to what their league's strength is in this year. And, you know, I think they were a really good team. Again, in the regional advisory committee calls, it was there was conversation in this same regards, and the belief was that the league would merit one bid out of that league, and everybody hoped that would be Jackson State. Obviously, it did not go there. Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things too, if you don't mind me just addressing this as well, is that one of the things that in this weird year, in this strange year, and I want to make sure that we don't try to push people towards playing conference only schedules, because in the COVID year, that would be acceptable for the committee to look at and try to evaluate, knowing that we're in just this abnormal year. But once we get out of this abnormality, and if people go to conference only schedules, it will be detrimental, as it was previous to COVID, if you played a conference only, a very limited non-conference schedule. So in relationship to Norfolk State, excuse me, Jackson State, they were 1-7 in non-conference, and that was the big reason why we felt they did not merit it.
All right, let's go ahead back to Evan Bland. Evan, go ahead with your next question.
Jeff, kind of along those same lines, I know a lot of people locally were wondering about Nebraska as a Power League Big Ten champ, playing at the #1 overall seed in Arkansas. I'm just curious, what were the conversations like in that, and do you think that they were somewhat penalized by that league-only schedule that you're talking about?
Maybe, and I hate to give you such a definitive answer, but I do know that somebody's got to play Arkansas, and they set themselves apart in the SEC. And when we looked at the overall field, we try to balance the field So we look at the 2, 3, the 1, 2, and 3 seeds in every bracket that we have, and we try to give an assessment of, in the totality, is that a fair bracket? The 4s are in there as well, and we try to make sure that that's a good total region. And when we looked at that number 1 region with Arkansas in it, we spent a great deal of time and actually flipped out multiple teams in that region until we ended up with this assessment with it. And I'm sorry, I lost it. Yeah. So that's pretty much what it was. I mean, I would think it was difficult to get there, but we ended up, it just is, somebody's got to play the number 1.
All right, let's go next to Mark Etheridge. Mark, go ahead with your question.
Me again, Jeff. You have teams in the field that finished 5 games under 500 in their conference. How does the committee evaluate best versus most deserving, specifically with conference standings?
You know, Mark, I come from Stetson University, which is what we consider to be one of those mid-majors. And we always walk into the year, you know, and we have in our mind, if we can hit a magic number of wins and if we play a good schedule, that we should be in the field. And that's our perspective as we walk into it. When I'm sitting in the room with the committee members, we have representation from Power 5 conferences as well as mid-majors in the whole conversation in that discussion. And the discussion spends a lot of time evaluating, you know, is the number 5 in a Power 5 conference equivalent to the number 2 in a mid-major conference, and how do we get there? And I have to tell you again, and I've said this several times already, it's the regional advisory committees provide us great value. They are coaches in every league that we have. There's a coach representation, and that provides us with that type of input that you can't get statistically. And in this year, where statistics are not as significant as a point of decision for you, that's where those regional calls came in. And that's pretty much where the assessment laid out.
So the regional advisory committee played a huge role. Is that's the when you're 5 games under?
It plays a role because you're talking about the eye test. You're talking about seeing the team play rather than relying upon the statistical reports. Now, trust me, I am all about let's reward achievement, and that's what this committee decided with Fairfield when they looked at their record. But you know, the team under 500, again, regional advisory committees gave us recommendations from when they saw everybody in that region, and came with recommendations forward to the committee as a whole.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's go to a follow-up from Eric Sorensen. Eric, go ahead with your question.
Okay, hey again, Jeff, Eric Sorensen, D1 Baseball. I thought Southern Miss was one of the more intriguing picks. I know that they were up for a possible home regional and then got sent, probably as one of the better 2 seeds, got sent to Ole Miss. Was there thought to sending them to Ole Miss over sending them to Mississippi State because Mississippi State had a higher, I guess, is a higher hierarchy in this 1 through 16?
Is that because of the matches? Excuse me. Yeah, I think part of it was, and I apologize, I turned to just ask in trying to recall that conversation. I think there was conversation about balancing the region. And I also think there was some head-to-head matchups that we were trying to avoid, that it just wasn't a continuation of the regular season. And so that's the 2 factors that I think were the primary ones in that decision.